It's winter time here in the Northeast. Sitting here, not much trout fishing to do. In fact, my waders are on their way to Patagonia right now to get a little repair done on them. And I'm sitting here thinking about doing some trout fishing come springtime. And one indispensable fly for trout fishing is the Barr Emerger. This is to mayfly hatches what the taboo caddis is to caddis hatches. This is a dynamite fly. Super fly designed by Barr of Colorado. It works great. Let's tie it together. Generally speaking, the Barr Emerger is a great imitation of mayflies. Now, when fishing the Barr Emerger, tie it as a dropper off your dry fly. You can see a nice wild brook trout caught from a spring creek with a Barr Emerger in the corner of its mouth, right here. But it's not only for little fish. There's a nice big Delaware River rainbow and I've caught many of them on it. Be careful. Fish will rush your dry. They're actually taking the Barr Emerger. The Barr Emerger can be fished in many different ways. My favorite way to fish it is as a dropper off the back of a dry fly, 15 or 18 inches of mono between them. Actually, fluorocarbon I like even more. So, more than anything, I think it represents an emerging nymph. But it could be any of a variety of stages of a mayfly nymph. I use this pattern for many hatches. Sulfurs and olives come to mind that I use it for constantly. But what I'm going to tie for you today and show you is one for a light Cahill. And it really doesn't make a difference. You just change the colors according to the hatch. Typically the way I fish this fly is off of the back of a parashuck mayfly or perhaps a comparadun. Those are probably my two favorite ways to fish it. My buddy Pat McCloskey loves this fly, Mike Madden loves this fly, John Pecorum loves this fly, Eric Lind. So many people that I fish and spend a lot of time with love this fly. I strongly recommend you learn how to tie it. So as we've said on several videos so far, the shank tends to bend above the barb of the hook, so I stopped tying the thread at the barb of the hook. And with the Barr Emerger, the original calls for dry fly hackle at the back, but I kind of prefer wet fly hackle. I use dry fly sometime, but I just have a little inkling toward wet fly. For one thing, it can wiggle a little bit in the water, which is a good thing. Now, the original doesn't necessarily call for a rib, but I like to put a rib in there, and I do want this fly to sink, so maybe the rib helps it sink a little, maybe it helps the body appear segmented, maybe it makes absolutely no difference at all. It's just a little nuance with the way I tie it. I am positive if you stick to the original recipe, you will catch plenty of fish with it too. I just tie it this way, and I've caught a lot of fish, so I don't feel any need to change the way I tie. This looks like it might not be exactly horizontal, so let me just adjust it a little bit. There we go. Okay, now the back half of the fly, I believe, is basically, or the back 2/3, is basically the nymph part of the fly. And since it's an emerger, you've got the dun kind of crawling out of the back shuck area. So the back half, we tend to make the color of a nymph. And in the case of the light Cahill nymph, it's kind of like an olivey tan kind of nymph. And I get some dubbing for that right now. Look, I don't think I'm necessarily an expert in dubbing or anything like that, but I do have a little system that works for me. What I like to do is to start with the Cucci Nastasi blends and then spice it up a little bit, always with a little bit of Antron, and then a little bit of spiky dubbing and a little bit of colors that I think I see in the natural, and I work it from there. Okay, so you'll notice that this dubbing is tied on there very sparsely, and also so that I don't want it tight on the shank. The reason is because I want it to trap air bubbles as it's emerging. This phenomenon of trapping air bubbles is not unique to caddis flies. It is also a big part of mayflies. And one other thing about this fly that's really worth noting if you fish it as a dropper, as I do, is that so very often your dry fly is drifting and you will swear that you had a fish take your dry fly. You'll set the hook, you'll get the fish in, and you'll notice that the dry fly the fish did not take the dry fly. In fact, nestled squarely in the jaw or front of the mouth of the fish will be the Barr Emerger, and you'll say to yourself, man, I swore he took the dry. But the truth is, he's taking the emerging mayfly nymph. And a lot of times we've been conditioned by the literature to say, oh, look, a splashy rise, he must be on caddis. And this fly has taught me that that is definitely not necessarily the case. It could be, but it is not necessarily. All right, as usual, I always start my dubbing forward and work my way back, and then reverse and work my way forward, getting a nice spiky effect. I use my my index finger here to stop, make a little bit more of a bump. I really don't want it going forward anymore. And there. Okay. Tying it off. Come around a couple of times. If you've ever seen me tie or heard of flies that I like to tie, I try as hard as I can to make flies darn near indestructible. So you'll notice I brought that forward. Now I'm going to loop it back around and really lock it in. I do that all the time with different materials. Okay, just so they never pull apart on the river. I can tell you that it's pretty rare that the flies fall apart. Once in a while the whip finish gives, and I don't use head cement. So that will happen to the flies, but that's pretty much about it. Okay. Now, the style of Barr Emerger that I'm going to use right now, as I said before, uses a rib. So I'm going to counterwind the rib, though, even before I counterwind the rib, I want to just spike it up even a little bit more. And with the video, I think you'll see that that dubbing's nice and spiky. I think you'll see that it has, oh, a little tail fiber got out of the way. I think you'll see that it has a texture to it. And now I'm just going to bring through the brass rib. And I think that further helps give it a little bit of a reflection of light, a little bit of weight, a little segmentation, none of which are a bad thing. They may be completely unnecessary, I really don't know. I just like it, and it's proven productive for me. So far I'm almost done with the Barr Emerger. This really is a very simple fly to tie. Next up is to form the thorax. So back again to forming the thorax. The style I'm doing now is one that has a flashback to it. So I take some mirage tinsel, which is, originally called for by Dr. Barr. He is a dentist. And I lay that right along the back as such, locking it in. And the next thing I'm going to do is, you can use lots of different things for winging on this. I used a soft hackle from whiting a little dark bar ginger for the tail section, but I really, call it a little nod to tradition, or just the fact that I really like these feathers. But I'm going with wood duck, natural wood duck for the wing here. And trim it flush, set it up, lay it right on top, and you're going to make a bump for the thorax. The thorax is always a little bigger than the body, so don't be afraid to leave it there. Make sure as I look at this that I go all the way back to where the abdomen starts, and then I wrap this down. Now the next thing I'm going to do is form the body, and the body should be, or the thorax, I'm sorry, should be the color of the dun that's emerging. Now this is going to be a light Cahill, so it's a pale yellow color that I'm putting on here, and I'm actually going to do this in 2 steps because I definitely want a bump. If I had to choose between too small a bump and too big a bump, I would choose too big a bump rather than too small. And I think when I load up this much dubbing, I think it's going to end up just a bit small, so then I'll add about half again with the amount of dubbing. Alright, yeah, see, I think it's just a tiny bit small, so I'm going to add just a little bit more. I don't want to make a humongous bump, But by the same token, I want it to be pretty obvious that there's a change here. So I have my tight dubbing loop formed. Or it's not a dubbing loop, I'm sorry. I twisted the dubbing on there. And there we go. Just about done. I'm going to pull what will be the emerging wing buds, or wing pad buds, forward. You may hear some ambulances in the background or some police in the background. Hopefully we don't have any issues in the neighborhood. I don't live in a slum area, I promise you. Alright. You'll notice that I split the wing as it comes across. There's the split, you can see. Then I bring up that split the flashback material, the Mirage tinsel. I lock that down. And again, I'm such a stickler for reinforcing everything every chance I get. If given the choice between reinforcing and making extra durable versus making a fly that'll never go into a shadow box, I will choose extra durable. Unless, of course, I'm making a shadow box, and those are pretty rare. So, here's my eye of the hook, little whip finish time. 1, 2, 3, 4. And now, I like to cut it slightly longer than the pad. So, if you look here, I'm a little longer than the wing pad of the thorax, and just snip. And right there. And there, folks, is the Barr Emerger. John Barr really came up with a winner of a fly here. I use this for virtually every single hatch that I take for mayflies during the year. One I can think of I don't use it for is an Isonychia hatch. Pretty much all the others I use it for. I carry them in a ton of styles and sizes. They're with me all the time. Taboo caddis, Barr Emergers. They're always with me with some dry flies. It's my favorite way to fish. And then I'll bring some nymphs and a few streamers. I'm not really big on streamers for trout. So here is the Barr Emerger. Notice the little contrast between the nymph part, the abdomen, and the thorax. It's a dynamite fly. I love to fish this on the Farmington. I love to fish it on the Delaware. Particularly love it for sulfur and olive hatches, for Cahill hatches, for Hendrickson hatches. Pretty much any hatch.